Hello, welcome back to the 7th installment of Easement Act series. This is Lovit and I am your host. My name is Akash. I am a 4th year law student in South Calcutta Law College. Okay, that's enough about me. Let's now talk easement. This Indian Easements Act is actually divided into 6 chapters. Today we'll be starting with the 3rd chapter, which is section 20 to section 31. Before that, we'll spend 1 minute in section 19, which is the last section of chapter 2, which was about imposition, acquisition and transfer of easement, which you left in the previous video. After that, we'll kick off chapter 3 with section 20, which talks about the general rules that are needed to be followed in this chapter, in the whole chapter 3. And then we'll go with section 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 and finally section 27. And with that, we'll end today's video. Each of these division will be time-stamped below, which will also make YouTube divide them into chapters in the slider. Pretty great feature, and so you can skip around to your point of necessity or liking. So now we'll roll this quick intro, and after that, let's get down to business. So section 19, the last section of chapter 2, it says that when a dominant heritage is transferred by sale or gift or operation of law or by whatsoever means, the easement right linked to that dominant heritage is also passed to the new owner. So understand that the easement right is not a personal right, rather it is a right that is enjoyed by virtue of being the legal owner of the dominant heritage. Yeah, that's it, and I do realize that I should have covered it in the last video and should not have left it for this video. Anyhow, now we'll start chapter 3, which talks about incidents of easement, which can mean both privilege and burden of an easement. We'll understand it better as we make progress. Alright, so the first section of this chapter is section 20. It basically says that the provisions of this chapter is controlled by any contract between the dominant and the servant owner. It basically means that if there is a contract between the dominant and the servant owner and any term of that contract is in conflict with any of the rules laid down in this chapter, then the terms of that contract will prevail and not the rules laid down in this chapter. So the terms of the contract between the dominant and the servant owner will have an upper hand over the rules laid down in this chapter. And in absence of any contract between the dominant and the servant owner, the rules laid down in this chapter will automatically become enforceable. Cool? Now let's move on to the next section, which is section 21, obviously. So section 21 says that the easement right over a servant heritage cannot be used for any purpose which is not connected to the beneficial enjoyment of the dominant heritage. In other words, and which is more important, a servant heritage, an easement right over a servant heritage can be used for any purpose which is connected to the beneficial enjoyment of the dominant heritage. So let's say there's this guy, A, and he owns a house, let's call it Gryffindor, because why not? And in front of Gryffindor, there is the Great Fields, which is owned by B. Now, the Great Fields is the only way of getting access to Gryffindor. So, A as the owner of Gryffindor will obviously use his easement right of way over the Great Fields to get into Gryffindor. But apart from A, his family members, his guests, his servants, his customers, if suppose he runs a business from his house, they all can use the Great Fields to get access to Gryffindor, because the purpose of this is related to the beneficial enjoyment of Gryffindor, that is the dominant heritage. If these people are not allowed to use the Great Fields to get into Gryffindor, the house cannot be used in a proper and reasonable manner. And hence B, the owner of the Great Fields, is bound to let all these people in addition to A to use his land to get into Gryffindor, i.e. the dominant heritage. Right, now section 22. The dominant owner must exercise his right of easement in a way which is least onerous to the servant owner. It means that he must use his right in a way that puts the least amount of burden on the servant heritage. And if the servant owner demarcates a specific part of the servant heritage for use of the easement right, and the easement right can be used reasonably well, staying within the limits of such demarcation, the dominant owner is bound to oblige to such restrictions. So in our previous example, suppose if B demarcates this pathway for A to follow to get into Gryffindor, A must oblige and follow that particular path to get into his house, because it is a very reasonable restriction, right? You can easily use this pathway to get into Gryffindor without any problem, and he must now do not use in whatsoever way the remaining parts of the Great Field, which now if done will be considered as trespassing. Now section 23. You need to read it with reference to section 22, which says that the dominant owner must use the servant heritage in a way which is least onerous to the servant owner. Now section 23 says that yes, the dominant owner must use the servant heritage in a way that is least onerous to the servant owner, but he may from time to time change the mode and place of enjoyment of the easement if it doesn't pose any additional burden on the servant heritage except for right of way, in which case he cannot change the line of passage even if it does not pose any additional burden on the servant heritage. Now I'll be giving you two examples here, so bear with me. So in the first example, let's say A is a sawmill owner. Now for the purpose of his mill, he draws water from this river, from this water channel alongside his mill. Now he can convert the sawmill to a paper mill, or he can change the location of the mill from this land to an adjoining piece of land also owned by him and all, which is also alongside the river, and that will not make him ineligible for using the easement right of water, provided that he still uses the same or at least similar amount of water from the particular river. If he does that, the changing of the mode or the place will not make him ineligible for the easement right, because according to section 23, he is allowed to change the mode and place of the enjoyment of the easement without any restriction. Now for the second example, Gryffindor makes a comeback, so do the Great Fields. So suppose A was using this particular path for getting into Gryffindor through the Great Fields. Now suppose the Great Fields is a barren patch of land. There is no vegetation, nothing, and if A changes his way from this to this, that won't pose any additional damage or any additional burden on the servant heritage on the Great Fields, because it's a barren patch of land. B, the owner puts it to no good use whatsoever. But according to the exception of this section, even though changing the path will not put any additional burden on the servant heritage, A cannot change his path from this to this for getting into Gryffindor as per the exception stated in section 23. Cool? Okay, now moving on. Section 24. Now this is interesting. It talks about accessory rights. What's that? Accessory rights means the right to do any act necessary for the full enjoyment of the easement right. Okay, breaking down. So suppose A has a right to put a pipeline through B's land to meet his water resources. So obviously now to put down a pipeline, you need to dig up the land and mend it. So for this purpose, A can get into B's land and dig up his land to mend his pipeline. But the section also provides that during exercising his accessory rights, the dominant owner must be very, very careful that he puts or inflicts the least amount of damage on the servant heritage. And whatever damage he causes to servant heritage, because even if he causes least amount of damage, there will be some amount of damage, he needs to repair that. He needs to restore the servant heritage in a way that it existed before he exercised his accessory rights. So in our example, A can get into B's land and dig up his land to mend his pipe, sure. But then he must not dig any more that is absolutely necessary for putting down the pipeline. And after he does so, he must restore the land as it was before he started digging up. That is his responsibility according to section 24. Alright, now section 25 and 26 together, because both are related to section 24 and basically are just extensions of section 24. So section 25 says that regarding the accessory rights, any cost of construction or repair or whatsoever other expenses that is required for preserving the easement right has to be borne by the dominant owner. And section 26 says that in case the dominant owner fails to repair the servant heritage for any damage that has been caused because of him exercising his accessory rights, the servant owner is entitled to claim damages from him. So in our example, the liability of all the costs of digging of the land and mending the pipe solely rests on A, the dominant owner. And in case he fails to repair the land of B after, suppose, mending the pipe, after he is done, he does not repair the land, B is entitled to sue A for any damages that has been caused to his land for him exercising his accessory rights. And finally, section 27 says that the servant owner is not bound in whatsoever way to do anything for the benefit of the dominant heritage, other than, of course, letting the dominant owner use his right of easement. What I'm trying to say will be cleared by this old example. You guessed it, Gryffindor and the Great Fields. Now, B, the owner of the Great Fields, he cannot do anything actively to block the passage of A through his field to his house, Gryffindor. But his liability ends there. His liability ends at the point where he does not actively block A from using his right of way. But it is not the duty or obligation of B to maintain the Great Fields in such a manner that A can use his right of way properly. So suppose B allows A to use the Great Fields for getting into his land. He doesn't oppose it. But the grasses of the field grow to such an extent that it becomes inconvenient to use the fields for getting into anywhere. Now, the onus of cutting that grass so that A can use his right of way properly is not on B. If A wants to use that property, the onus is on him to cut the grass and maintain the way for him to be able to use that particular right, and not on B. So section 27 makes it clear that the liability of the servant owner ends at the point where he allows the dominant owner to use the right and does not actively block the right, the easement right. But apart from that, he is not obliged to do anything for the benefit of the dominant heritage. Alright, so that's it for today's video. Like the video if you like it, subscribe to the channel if you like some other videos of the channel. And obviously the Easement Act series is still not complete, and hopefully we'll complete chapter 3 in the next video. So stay tuned for that. Press the bell icon to receive notifications when I upload that. I'll be completing the series very soon. I plan to do that, and the social media handles have been flushing for a long time. I'll keep them in the description as well. I'll link them in the description as well, so follow me there to, I guess, know more about me, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, remember that the way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. Bye.